Hello, everyone, and welcome to Three Coaches, One Topic. And today, it's very much waving the flag for Wales, as I am joined by Kelly and Mary-Rita. We've got a really interesting topic. It's a topic that I don't actually know a lot about. So for those that are listening, I'm on this journey with you as well. So I will just be asking curious questions, hoping to learn more. Before we get started, I'm going to pass you over to Kelly. And Kelly, if you can just let us know what you do, where you're from, and a little bit about your journey so far.
Hi everyone. I'm from Wales, and I'm founder of Authentically Rise. So I help people to reconnect with themselves who sometimes feel stuck, or they may be in fear or overwhelmed, to start to kind of unpick that so that they can make conscious change and how they kind of even respond to their lives rather than react. So it enhances well-being and everything in between. So that's what I do. I'm also a student, do my master's in humanistic psychotherapy, and I'm a mum. And I've kind of organically arrived at this point of my life just from my own personal development journey, my own healing journey. And it's kind of just, I found myself kind of just navigating into this space, and I'm kind of entrusting the folding of my life. And I'm excited to be here.
It's great to have you here again. I always love how calm and you just drop the most gorgeous wisdom bombs out of all my guests. And I love it. I just want to quote you for all these things. Thank you so much for coming on today, Kelly. I really appreciate it. And over to you, Mary, who I've just met and absolutely adore.
Hi everyone. Yeah, so I am Mary-Rita, but yeah, most people call me Mary, and I'm also from Wales, but coming to you today from Ras Al Khaimah in the United Arab Emirates. Relocated to the desert about 7 years ago. But as a Welsh person, my heart is in storytelling, and I guess that is my journey. I was reflecting on my journey as I thought about who am I and where am I going? And one thing that has always been a consistent is storytelling, but not just storytelling, but story sharing and story keeping, and also story shaping. And that's where my business came from. So I created Mysterium on the back of doing my master's in consciousness, spirituality, and transpersonal psychology. And Mysterium is all about liminal spaces. So it's being able to consciously step into your story. And so I work with people through transitions into transformation using imaginal spaces, emotions, spirituality, and transpersonal psychology. And when I think of my own journey, I have always been an intuitive creature. And so I do listen to that part of me, and it served me well up to this point in my life. So.
Oh, this is great. Thank you so much. And what I love about you both is that you're lifelong learners, and there are so many layers to both of you. I have the pleasure of looking at your bios and knowing that, you know, where you are today and all the things that you've gone through and experienced, it's just been so transformative. So thank you both for being here. Right, my name's Donna Burfield, and I am the founder of Joy and Purpose Coaching, where I interact and coach and have collaborations with parents. I was in education for 26 years. I am a single mother. I have 3 now very grown-up children and 2 very tall twin boys. 6'3". I feel like an Oompa Loompa. And I do. They look like my bodyguards walking in. I've got a 24-year-old daughter as well who, is just turning into this wonderful, wonderful young lady. I also run a group here in the UAE called Coaches Supporting Coaches. This, again, is another passion of mine, where it ties up with being ethical and serving and having the right intentions, which is how I met a load of coaches, which is inspiring. So what we're going to do, I'm going to start off with what our topic is today, is exploring higher consciousness, transpersonal psychology in coaching. Now, I am going to be completely honest. I knew pretty much diddly squat about this. I had heard about it, but I hadn't done a lot of research because I've been researching other things. So when over a cup of coffee with Mary, this came up, and it was just like, right, I know the exact person you need to come on with, and that was with Kelly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it over to you guys, and I would love to hear your definition of transpersonal psychology. I don't mind who starts.
Okay, I'm happy to start. It's a bit of a question like, how long is a piece of string? How do you define transpersonal psychology? It has so many faces. It has so many definitions. There's even an article that has been written asking what is transpersonal psychology, which can be found in the Transpersonal Psychology Handbook. But one of the things that for me, as somebody who has studied performing arts, drama and creativity, one of the things that really touched me about transpersonal psychology is this sense of going beyond self. So you're stepping out of the role of self and allowing and surrendering to a larger existence, the sense of a larger consciousness, the opportunity to explore self in relation to mythology, symbolism, dreams, higher states of consciousness. And that's where transpersonal psychology sits for me. It's this seed that came from humanistic psychology and has just taken it to the next level. So it talks about that sense of our relationship with existence, why we're here, how we are here to serve not just each other, but also the planet, and beyond the planet into consciousness and the universe, and into whether spiritual, religious, or whatever beliefs we hold. What I love about transpersonal psychology, it allows all of it to be included. It is inclusive of every practice and belief system and value. So that's my kind of take on transpersonal.
Yeah.
Thank you. Right, Kelly, follow that one.
I know. How do I follow that? Oh my goodness. No, that's it's beautifully said, and I'll take it from like Mary kindly said, the transpersonal psychology is just a huge world, and the more you look into it, even if you've gone into the same thing, you can be like, what was it again? You can kind of revisit and learn more, and you're just always learning within this kind of field. It's very expansive, and I think expansive is the key word here. So for me, I did the transpersonal coaching psychology, and we came from the same kind of school, the Aleph Trust. And for me, it's really allowing us to, in my transpersonal point of view, it is how we kind of have a relationship with ourselves, who we believe we are, how we have a relationship with others, how we have a relationship with the communities, the world, our organizations, everything, how we kind of are relating. So, and they're kind of metaphor. I'm quite visual, especially since doing transpersonal. Is that I would almost see it, for example, is that sometimes we can kind of be stuck on one channel. So like if sometimes you come home, you might watch EastEnders in the UK and put Channel 3 on, and sometimes we can get stuck on that channel. And that channel can be all the beliefs, all the narratives that we think we are, how we think we can live. But actually not realizing, actually there's Channel 1, there's Netflix, there's Amazon Prime, and all this kind of lives within us, but we can forget. And a kind of analogy to kind of put this into kind of some groundedness is, you could say, for example, we all have emotions. So we can say like, I feel angry, or I am angry. So we bring the ego in because it's the I. Yeah. So when I say I am angry, and you might say something to yourself right now is, I feel sad, or I am this. So it can feel all of us. But for me, the transpersonal bit in reality would look like a part of me is angry, a part of me is sad, because there's an awareness that is acknowledging it, which is more of who we are, outside the narratives or out the scripts, that can hold it. And from this place, we can gain much more wisdom. We can gain much more compassion, much more in connection. We can see more of ourselves in others. We can kind of be more conscious about, if I make this decision, the impact, the ripple effects it has. So we start to live much more aligned to a different motivational base. We start to be much more conscious about who I want to be in the world, how I want to contribute, who am I as a person, from my true essence, rather than what I think I've been told I am. So it's beginning to kind of shred away all these kind of conditioning, really. And it's not about getting rid of the ego at all. It's about maturing and growing and developing, allowing our spiritual self, in a spiritual intelligence, to start maturing the ego, so it's more integrated. So we start kind of living life with much more fullness. So that's how I kind of would explain it in a kind of how this may kind of look in a coaching perspective, as much as I can. I hope that makes some sort of sense. Yeah, I'll leave it there for now.
No, I love it. And can I just thank both of you, because, as I said, I have heard of it on and off, but I think the way that it has been described to me it put me off. Or maybe I wasn't in that space to actually listen to it right there and then. It came across as quite woo-woo, and that's not me. I'm quite a masculine person, and then I need, and it was like getting in touch with your spiritual side. And then other people, it felt quite religious based. Again, that was another thing that kind of put me off. But having spoken to you, Mary, the other day, I went off and did a little bit of research, and I am really, really surprised at how interesting and how much more I want to dig deeper into this. Now, can you talk me through a little bit of what prompted you to go off and do your master's, doing your coaching certification to do with this in the first place?
Well, this is a strange story, talking about storytelling and kind of bringing it to transpersonal awareness, which I just want to say thank you, Kelly, because when you said the word awareness, this to me is the value of the transpersonal, that awareness that takes us outside ourselves and into the bigger level of consciousness and awareness, transcending and including the ego and bringing kind of all these different parts together. And I would say I'm probably a student of Jung, Carl Gustav Jung. His work has spoken to me since I was 16, and I discovered tarot. And I became very fascinated with tarot cards and their symbolism and the archetypes and their universal collective wisdom that, you could really bring through. Yes, you can use them as playing cards, but then each of these kind of cards and symbols seem to have deeper levels. And if you really go and study, the arcana within the tarot, they're steeped in history. They're steeped in symbolism and in the mystical and in the esoteric. And this is kind of where that journey started for me, of symbolism. And, Carl Gustav Jung is famous for the representation of synchronicity in life. So when we experience synchronicity, it is trying to tell us something. And it really marries into transpersonal ways of being, because if you are listening to the symbols of the world and you are really looking out into that part of yourself and into consciousness and the cosmos, then maybe there are messages out there. Maybe we can be open to these messages. And I believe in magic. I believe in the mystical. I believe in the imaginal realm. As somebody who's studied drama, performing arts and storytelling, it's the heart of this study. And so my journey into my master's started with a hummingbird. And it started with a hummingbird seemingly just tapping on my shoulder all the time, and tapping the window. I would see them everywhere. And I was like, oh, the hummingbird, what does a hummingbird mean? And, you do your little bit of research, and I just felt like something was calling me. And if I go back into my degree, when I did my dissertation for my degree, it brought in a little bit of transpersonal psychology. I did creative expressive therapies, but really specializing in drama. And I used the mask, the theatre mask, to explore the concept of absence, the presence of absence, if you like. And within that, a transpersonal way of using a mask to bring a sense of awareness to self, other, relationships, and the different attachments that we have. And so the transpersonal sort of started to speak to me. And then as I followed this hummingbird, I was just hit with this deep intuitive awareness that the transpersonal was coming back. It had been several years. So I started to do a little bit of research. And then I came across the Aleph Trust online, and lo and behold, what is the symbol of the Aleph Trust? It is a hummingbird. And I knew on so many levels, on so many channels, as Kelly beautifully described. I knew this was not just Channel 3, this was Netflix, this was Amazon Prime, this is all the channels open to saying, here's something for you to explore. And then I enrolled in the course, and it took me 3 years to go through. And I was saying to Kelly, when we were offline, it was a game changer for me, absolutely life-changing. And I just want to kind of speak into the hummingbird, because that whole journey, which was through the pandemic, so we were in lockdown doing this incredible course, but also, teaching online. I was a drama teacher at the time. And it became very intense. I was spending about 18 hours a day online, because my master's program was online and also my teaching was online, which was not how it was when I began. And so there's that sense of, okay, this was a tough time. But when I've completed my dissertation, this is 3 years, the day I submitted, the actual day I submitted, a hummingbird landed on my balcony and tapped the window.
No.
And I looked over and I was like, yes, you're right. We're finished here. We've come full circle.
Wow.
And so I guess that's a bit of a honouring of the woo-woo, because I am a big fan of kind of the woo-woo, but also the woo-woo in terms of bringing it into practical application. And so, when heart, mind and soul, masculine and feminine, come together, this is what you can open up to. And I feel that it was being open to the symbolism, to the synchronicity, to my journey with Jung and archetypes and the tarot, that allowed me to maybe see this bird, as something more, which then brings us back full circle to transpersonal awareness, which is one of my touchstone values. So
Beautiful. And
Wow.
sorry for saying woo woo.
I love it.
But how you explain that doesn't make it feel like it's so out there and, I've just smoked some weed or something. I mean, you actually did back it up. So, thank you. Let's get off that topic really quick. Kelly, what about yourself? I've never tried that.
I can tell you're a storyteller, Mary. I just love how you like you tell your story. But I was laughing as well, because I can relate to so many kind of like facets of that, and for me it was and if someone is thinking out there, well, I still not quite getting transpersonal, that's how I started. And I had done it was in the lockdowns, and I had been on quite my own personal development journey, a lot of kind of emotional healing, and naturally then I was like, okay, I'm going to do this kind of coaching program where I met Donna. And then after that, I had already, before I started the J Shetty, I had looked at the Aleph Trust, and something was telling me, it was out of my cognition, but it was something much more deep and more an intuitive knowing that I was like, not now. And I circled back to Jay Shetty, signed up for that. After I finished the Jay Shetty, I kept being pulled back to the Aleph Trust. And it was it was like a pull, like a really intuitive pull. And I was trying to read up, what is transpersonal coaching psychology? I still don't get it. What am I signing up for? I'm investing my time, my money. I don't get it. But every time something inside of me was saying, you don't need to know, just sign up. And I trusted that pull towards it. And I can honestly say it was a year, and I'm still very much, I still are connected to the community, and I dip my toes in. And it was one of the most profound years of my life in regards to meeting so many different types of people from around the world, being introduced to concepts I had never explored, but starting to connect much more deeper with myself in a much more profound way, but not just with myself, but with nature even. And when you were saying about birds, during my course, I would have really unusual experiences with birds. It happened to me so many times. And then I find myself Googling, what is that bird? And then when I looked at the kind of what that bird stood for, I was like, oh my goodness, this is really relative to what I need to know. And I mean, weird stuff happened. And you can try and dismiss it, but when you start peeling back and going, okay, if this was a little knocking, if something is trying to send me a message of support, something that maybe is in my shadow, I'm not seeing, I'm not acknowledging, and then when you kind of dive in, you're like, wow, okay, yeah, something's happening. I don't need to make sense of it. Very similar to how I started this journey, but if I trust it, this is helping me to grow. This is helping me to kind of move forward. And I think for me, it's like exactly what Mary said. It's allowed me to open up and trust a lot more. It's allowed me to just be much more curious and actually see magic, moment to moment. And that magic allows my nervous system to regulate, and if you feel a bit stressed and you go, just notice something outside your window if you're in a car. It's just something, it's quite soothing when you start to kind of see things differently, even if you're walking the same path or driving the same road. It has a deeper connection. It's quite hard sometimes to explain it. For me, it's a very felt experience. And and my journey's gone on from there. I have had, before I started the Aleph Trust, and probably this instigated, I am a meditator for a number of years, and I had an out-of-body experience, and it was instant, where I didn't even realize until I was kind of looking down on myself. And then my children, I got an open plan house, my children were in the kitchen with my husband, and I almost could see them. But it was a very in that space, this was seconds, but so much happened in that seconds. It was a real felt love, but not like a love, oh, I love you. It wasn't like that. It was just this one energy. It was this one energy, and it was really holding. And then all of a sudden, I realized I wasn't in my physical body, and I freaked out. I completely freaked out, and I kind of like, oh my God, I'm back in my body. And it does sound, you and that's the kind of a spiritual experience. But sometimes you can have spiritual experiences and they not change. We can get in our heads and kind of just sit and say that didn't really happen. But when we allow those experiences to go, wow, what just happened there? I don't need to understand it, but so all I need to know, there's something much more than this body. It's something much more that's supporting me in life. It's something that's holding me. And that's been my kind of experience with it to date. And I'm sure it continues to evolve. It's evolving all the time. So, yeah.
Wow. Yes, you see, this is where I find that interesting, because I suppose if you haven't had the awareness and learning to accept and trust that kind of experience, as you were saying, could be pretty scary for someone. So walk me through, how do you work with your clients, and how do you incorporate transpersonal psychology with them. Before, Mary, you mentioned something about the archetypes, and Kelly, you mentioned about the ego. So, I would love to learn a little bit more about that.
Would you like to go, Kelly?
Oh, okay. And
Yeah.
this is going to be really interested in this, and I can't wait to hear from Mary as well, because this like we were saying earlier, it's a big world, and how we kind of play with it is completely different, and it's not right or wrong. And so for me, with clients, if I kind of the transpersonal coaching psychology has a kind of framework, and what they really emphasize throughout the course, and is a really experiment in it's more of an experience kind of course, even though you do the theory and the academia, but it's really allowing us to begin to be much more present, and really trusting what is unfolding moment to moment, and not getting caught up back here, not getting caught up in the forward, but just allowing us to be here, right here in the moment. And that can seem really, really simple, but when we live in a Western culture that's distracting, always getting us busy in our heads, overthinking, live from here up, it's quite difficult. It takes practice to really be present, and noticing when you're not present and bring yourself back to presence. So as a coach, that is really fundamental, to really embody and cultivate that awareness of when you're present, when you're not present, so that you can create that kind of co-creation with the client. So some clients might come with, maybe they lack confidence, maybe they feel really overwhelmed, maybe they realize, actually, I'm just constantly people pleasing and I'm burning out. They may be in perfectionism, that actually I'm putting so much pressure on myself that is literally a metaphorical whipping me, and I just keep pushing to myself, and I'm not even enjoying life. I'm not doing all the other things that are important to me. Maybe I'm taking my stress out on my children because I'm trying to do too much, and I'm not present. My head is somewhere else. So overwhelm is a big thing I see often, and anxiety. And there is a line I want to say between therapy and coaching, and it all depends on how they're functioning, the window of tolerance and stuff like that. But just to come back to the coaching side, so one of the key things that is fundamental in the transpersonal is going back to what I was saying earlier about the kind of channels. So for example, when someone comes, I say overwhelm. So I want to say they're just in that channel of overwhelm, and they think all of them is overwhelmed because it feels so real, it feels so heavy, and their probably nervous systems are completely dysregulated, and they can't see beyond that overwhelm. Yeah, and from a kind of transpersonal space, I know they're just not their lens has become really small, that their awareness has become very tight, because they kind of in the overwhelm. And if I was to kind of describe it as like a wave, and that they're in a wave of overwhelm, but they're actually in the wave. So we do different kind of tools to open up their awareness, so we kind of come underneath the wave. So if you go into the deep sea, you kind of come into much more the peace and the calm. You go deeper. And the more deeper you go, the more calm it is. The waves are still going, but you're creating space to be able to see the wave, but not actually just really be in it. You can acknowledge in the wave, and we can start to unpick, okay, if this part of you is overwhelmed, what's the part that is really acknowledging it? And we lean more into that and create more safety, create more space. And we see there's a part of us that's overwhelmed, and maybe start to unpick, what's that overwhelm needing? What's that part of you? What is it really needing? So that we start to meet ourselves where we are, and we start to create changes that align more to our values, that come from more of a motivating place, because it has meaning to us, it has purpose to us. We start to do things not how we think we should be doing it, because this is what's important to me. We start to kind of move away from all these narratives and scripts of well, I have to do it this way, to go about what are the other possibilities. So we start to open a window of possibilities and start to play in it. We don't have to be so rigid, and we don't have to be so kind of rigid and so like caught up. We can start to play and go, okay, but what are all the possibilities? What would that look like? What would that feel like? And starting to kind of step because we can tip back into overwhelm when we start to go, oh, but it could be like this. But we go, and let's get the inspiration for what the possibility, but what does that inspire us? What step do we take now that starts meeting ourselves, and we start creating change from a more conscious place? And what we do find is when we kind of make changes, which I say is our authentic self, is when we start making changes from this place, it's more it's more of a win-win-win. So it's a more win for ourselves, it's more for a win for the people in our lives, and it's more win for maybe the communities we live in, maybe our world is, or it's more of a win for the organizations that we're in. It's more, and that can look like daily stuff. For me personally, even doing this work, I'll be more conscious where I buy my stuff. Am I supporting a company that children are slave labor of children? If I put my money in that pot, but if I pay a little bit more and support this local company that values align with mine, then I'll take less to be able to support something. It come into daily life, even as a coach, because it changes when you're in this work. It naturally changes you. It naturally does. But as a client, that's what we do. So in a kind of visual aspect, it's like bringing them deeper away from the wave and creating more space, that liminal space that Mary was beautifully saying earlier, so that we can see things with much more clarity, with much more compassion, more humility, with much more perspective, much more insight. So we're consciously making small steps, small changes. Then we start, we start to build more boundaries. We start to build much more self-trust. We start to come away from different limiting beliefs and narratives. We start to come away from being a rescuer, maybe being a persecutor to ourselves or others. So we start coming away from, those kind of narratives. So I hope that makes sense. Please tell me if I'm not making sense.
No, you are. Well, you're making sense to me. And as I said, I'm still pretty green in this. But I think we've got another storyteller on here, by the way.
Yes, it's our Welsh roots.
It is. Well played. No, thank you so much, Kelly. And I love your voice. Since I've known you, and I've known you for a couple of years now, and when we've been going through the certification, you always brought that grounding, that spiritual side, which before meeting you and really going into this, I wouldn't have said I was a spiritual person. But the more I hear you and the more I get exposed to this, the more I think I am. I just haven't acknowledged it. So, thank you so much for that explanation. Right, Mary, tell us about the archetypes.
Well, I suppose just wonderful listening to Kelly's experiences and, just that awareness and, that meeting of self, just beautiful, really beautiful. And I think that that's what we're here to do, isn't it? We're here, if you think on a transpersonal level, that is the sense that everything that we do is serving not just our clients, but it's having a ripple effect throughout, because, the way you nurture your own little garden, those seeds will grow and those seeds will fly and land in other people's gardens and continue. And this is what I see as transpersonal awareness. And I guess where I am at the moment is I did my research on passage through the pandemic for teenagers who are on the threshold of adulthood. And I used a qualitative research method that came from transpersonal research methods, which is known as organic inquiry. And in organic inquiry, the first thing you do before you even start thinking about a proposal or contacting any co-researchers or storytellers is you build your relationship with spirit. And exactly what you were saying, Donna, about being spiritual. I think spirituality is something so vast. And, I like to see spirituality as a soup, whatever feels like it's serving you, the spiritual soup. You can take things from lots of different philosophies and religions and practices and find meaning and purpose that kind of creates a fusion of your own spirituality. And that's what I loved with organic inquiry, was that sense, okay, I'm building a relationship with spirit. And for me, spirit is synchronicity, symbolism, dreams, following the intuitive path, working with the archetypes. And for this particular research, 2 archetypes were revealed to me as the sort of guides in my life. And I'm going to mention the wonderful Mark Wentworth, who does Colour for Life. And I had my spiritual colours read by this incredible man who also comes from transpersonal ways of knowing. And 2 that came up for me, one was the wise guide, so the wise woman, and the other was the rebel. So I really enjoyed the paradox that existed here, the wise rebel. I thought, oh, I can use this. I can use this. And so that began kind of my research to work with the wise woman and this rebel part of me, because thinking I, thinking ego, thinking self, and then seeing ourselves in the fragments of different archetypes as well, and this is what I did, is like anchored to these 2 archetypes, and then felt, okay, I can now serve. I have made my connection to spirit. I have started the journey into an organic inquiry. And from that moment, I was then allowing the unfolding to take place. And a wonderful author within transpersonal academic circles is Jorge Ferrer. And he talks about participation in the mystery. And to me, the participation in the mystery is that sense of a participatory paradigm. So as we move towards the mystery and towards this unknown moment where the research has no face yet, something happens, because the mystery and the participatory consciousness, it wants to play. As Kelly said, when we play, things start happening. So it's like, oh, you hear me? I'm in, let's do this together. And from that point, my research grew into a beautiful space where I created a program for these co-researchers to go through in order to think about what would it be like on the other side of the pandemic, so passage through the pandemic. And we anchored this into organic inquiry research method, which starts with, the planting of the seeds and the spading up as well. So knowing, why are you doing this? Because, ego is always there. And sometimes the ego is in sacred mode. It's like in dance with the self. But sometimes the ego isn't seeing that this is actually maybe a selfish thing that's happening. So you're always working through these layers and using the archetypes to really hold the space for all these different experiences within the research. And on the back of my research, I started Mysterium. And Mysterium is a play on the word mysterium, which you will find in Jung's Red Book, which was gifted to me when I hit a new threshold, a new milestone. And so I opened the book randomly as part of this process of unfolding. And the book is this, it's huge, like it's massive. And I just opened it up and the Mysterium just came out. And I was like, there's something in the participation of the participatory mystery, the Mysterium, the liminal space. And within that space, I started to cultivate with spirit, with transpersonal research methods, with my co-researchers, a program. And when I completed the research, I've moved that into coaching from a Jungian depth coach perspective that really uses creative mediums to explore self and, goes into mythology and storytelling. And that's where I work with my clients. I meet them in this liminal space and I say, would you like to consciously step into your story and to see what happens when they embark on their individual, unique quest? But within that quest, they are also serving the collective. Yeah. And this is what was beautiful. You have your individual quests as Donna, Kelly, and Mary, but we also then, everything that we do towards our personal development and growth is serving the community, It's serving the collective, and it's having a ripple effect. And so as people go through the program, they encounter their quest. And within that quest, we explore applied transpersonal psychology. So using transpersonal psychology and really grounding it. So taking its spirituality, its academic face, but also saying, okay, well, how does it apply to day-to-day life? This is it. This is about bringing transpersonal psychology to the streets. I'm from Anglesey, and one of my visions is being able to walk into my local pub and just talk about transpersonal psychology, and people get it. It's like bringing it to the streets is so important to me. And it was the thread. It was the thread throughout my whole masters, in all the forum posts, in all my writings, in my essays, this practical application. And that's where I'm at. I've devised a program. It's at the moment a 9-session program. And my clients go through this program and activate a personal quest and use the archetypes that speak to them, the mythology that speaks to them, the symbols that speak to them. And I'm the gatekeeper. I keep the space open. I hold that liminal space. And that's where I'm at, just coming into that first year of Mysterium and turning my research into something that can be practically applied and, really anchored in this material world that we live in, where we have to go outside, we have to pay bills, we have to, go and buy new clothes, go on holiday, see people, have coffees. This is part of existence. And so let's bring the magic into the ordinary. This is beautiful.
I just love your energy. It's great. But what I have to say is, when you said, there was something that you said, and I felt this little bit of fear come up when you turned around and said, I invite you to step into your story. And I'm thinking, okay, so how do you support those clients, even for, I feel like I've dealt with a lot of things in my past, but of course, being human, when I'm down and things trigger you, it has a lot more of a negative effect. So how do you support those clients where there is that resistance and that fear of stepping into their story? Because when you step into your story, you're leaving yourself so vulnerable, and there has to be that trust with the coach or facilitator, for you to not feel judged or shamed or anything.
I guess, thank you. That's a really good question. And I think that sense of that fear coming up is that moment, isn't it, of the participation in the mystery, of stepping into the unknown. But what I do with my clients, the first thing that's so important to me is to cultivate a sacred and a safe space. So even before we embark on the quest, there will be 2 hours spent exploring anything that has come up for that client, why they have chosen Mysterium as their pathway, and how they would like to consciously step into their story. And here I'd like to mention the wonderful Kat Carcello that I'm doing the Journey Path Institute program with at the moment, which is towards being a creative depth coach as one of the areas of Mysterium. And she uses a spiral very similar to the spiral that I had in my research, which is, again, another beautiful synchronicity. So where are you on the spiral? When you're in a circle, like the hero's journey or the heroine's journey, it's very fixed, isn't it? It's like you start here, you refuse the call, you move to this space. And that's a very cyclical journey to the return. But when you bring a spiral into the mix, you can step anywhere into the story. You can be in the moment of entering. You can be in the moment of just not ready to enter yet. So you find the symbol, you find the archetype, you name your own quest. And that's what I say about that kind of sense of being a facilitator or a gatekeeper. And I guess that when I think about what do I call myself, because I am a jack of all trades, and anyone who kind of looks at my LinkedIn is like, okay, puma in the jungle, okay. so there is that sense of, so what do I want to do? Well, hold a safe and sacred space as you step into that, and also knowing that you can go to the point, and there's wonderful theories within transpersonal psychology and within creative depth coaching. Your psyche will never show you something that you're not ready to see, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's difficult. The fact that it's been able to come into this space of consciousness means that it's ready to be revealed. And so in a nutshell there, to me, it's pause, a real transitional pause, presence, as Kelly mentioned, the importance of being very present, holding a safe and sacred space, and then allowing the spiral to be the place where they enter, where that person enters, so they choose. And I just hold the gate open.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. And that does make sense. And also, to have that space where you can turn around and say, you know what, right now I can't do this. But the fact of admitting that, the next session, you may be ready because you've already released that and articulated it. So is there anything that you would like to add to that, Kelly?
No, there's so many beautiful things there. But just to add to what you just said, I think even for somebody to even recognize, and I love that you use, the spiral. I think that gives so much more fluidity to it, and and just more space to where am I. But I think even for somebody noticing, this is where I am, I'm not ready, it is already growth in the making, because we're already acknowledging something that maybe we have resistance to, or something that we're scared of, or uncertainty, because I honestly see there's so many people that try to hold on to certainty. And then when life is not certain, we can control it as much as we want. Life is not certain. So even that, just acknowledging that of where they're at, and being able to have that safe space to lean into it a little bit and start to and understand where that is really coming from, that is already more growth than probably some people even realize. But what I was really curious as well is when you're using archetypes, I'm just wondering, what have you discovered? I would imagine, like, from using archetypes, people learn so much more about themselves and expands their awareness of their patterns, of what is maybe blocking them, what is not working, where they're stuck. But I'm just wondering, I don't want to assume because I've only dipped my toes into archetypes, so on a shadow work retreat. So I'm really curious how you find working with archetypes, how it kind of helps people and maybe helped you.
Yeah, so thank you, Kelly. For me, it starts with the archetype of the child, because often when we do child work or inner child work, it's that sense of going back to us as children. But there is a way of going back to that child self through the archetype. So start thinking about how, we have, for example, Caroline Myss has some amazing archetypes around the magical child, the divine child, the nature child. And when you start to see the child part of you held in an archetype, you are then part of mythology, you are part of myth. Because the archetypes appear to us through story, through dreams, through imagination, through all of these creative places. And so the archetype that appears sometimes very early on in the quest, maybe in that first session, the archetype makes themselves known. Sometimes the archetype doesn't come till right at the very end, or maybe doesn't appear at all. But each of the archetypes can then be anchored to mythology. And when we go into mythology, we start to think about, our archetypes from our culture, or maybe from our religion, or from the stories that we inhabit. And so I've been working with archetypes in that way, that they are helping, they guide the quest on the imaginal level. And so whoever sort of presents as an archetype, and then thinking the difference between archetypes and sub-personalities. Because, you know, we look at, there's incredible applied transpersonal psychology practices where you can really go into that sense of sub-personalities. So that might be, you know, a part of you. So I have a little bit of a damsel in me, and, you know, the damsel, it wouldn't be considered like a big archetype, but it could be a sub-personality. And it's a shadow element of me, that wanting to be rescued. I don't ever admit to that. You know, that's like, but she exists in my archetypal space. That sense of the damsel in distress, something I would never own, but I feel she's there. And so I do that work with her on a shadow level. And so each of the archetypes and each of the stories and the mythology speaks, you know, individually to the client, and can appear, if you like, emerge in so many different ways, whether that's through guided visualization. We use these wonderful spiral cards from the Journey Path Institute, where your archetype could appear in a painting or a collage that you make, or it could be in stream conscious writing. And so they can be just brought into the different parts of the story. So I hope that makes sense. I realized I was kind of on this journey, which tends to happen with me. But if that makes sense, Kelly.
Yeah, really interesting. Yeah. And it's just something you touched on, I think is really, if I can say really quickly, I think is really important, is the shadow part. And you know, there's one thing, you know, you might have seen in social media, and you hear spiritual bypassing, and you know, this transpersonal psychology is about honoring all of ourselves, and that means seeing the stuff sometimes we don't want to see, and it's so important to kind of hold space for all those parts, because otherwise they take the lead in our lives anyway. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of touch on that a little bit.
Oh, yeah, this is brilliant. Seriously, thank you so much. I've learned so much today. Just before we sign, I'm sorry, I've got a bit of a. I didn't mean to do that. Just before we sign off, anybody out there listening, where can they go, or what resources, or do you have any tools and tips for them to start exploring a little bit, you know, for that first step? Throwing it out there.
Yeah, so I would say, you know, with transpersonal psychology, there is so much. You know, the Handbook of Transpersonal Psychology is a good place to start. It's a huge book. But what is beautiful about that handbook is that it looks at transpersonal psychology through so many lenses. And so that would be an academic space to start, looking at some of the research that's been done. On the sort of applied transpersonal psychology level, I would say Jorge Ferrer's work is incredible. Participation in the Mystery. It feels less academic, although it's academic as well, but it feels more accessible. And then there is a journal which it's slipped my mind, but this is really about applying transpersonal psychology to day-to-day life. So I don't know whether there's a way of slipping that in afterwards, or do I need to there is. Yeah, I can send that. And that to me is wonderful, because I started off with the academic handbook, but then when I went into these kind of more applied transpersonal psychology ideas, that's where I could see the journey from academia and, you know, that kind of inaccessible world into the more applied, practical, to the streets for transpersonal psychology as well.
Yeah, and also they can reach out to you two to find out more. Just saying. But anywho, Kelly, what about you? Any tips, tricks?
Yeah. So one thing in regard to kind of resources at the moment, I would point you I can send the link, but the lecturer that did all the kind of research on transpersonal psychology coaching, there's lots of free resources, because I'm still building my free resources at the moment. So I'll point you in his direction. So I can send the link for that. And there's a lot of different ways you can experience open awareness. So you can just listen to it in your own time and just see how that feels for you. But what I would say, if you do that, then the integration part is allowing yourself to just note what that experience was for you. So you might start with something that you're having a bit of difficulty with. Maybe you're feeling a bit like overwhelmed, you feel a bit stuck. Doing the open awareness for the free resources and just letting yourself just draw, doodle, write, and just allowing to see what comes from a different space when you change your consciousness. Another one I would say, just for day to day, is get outside. Yeah, even if you're having a day that feels really tough, or you just feel a bit overwhelmed, you feel a bit fearful, you feel worried, you feel anxious, just go, okay, just acknowledging that is a part of you. It's not all of you. Just noticing, okay, there is a part of me. So change your language. Yeah, so there's a part of me that feels anxious. Get out in nature, knowing that because there's a part of you, there's more possibilities. And just looking out in nature for different things, what you see. Because sometimes what I have found, just getting out in nature, you see different answers.
Yeah.
You know, and you just go, oh God, I didn't think of that. You know, you're moving your body, and the nature is very grounding, so it creates a bit of safety. But sometimes you'll just see how maybe a tree stands. You go, oh, that reminds me of something. You're accessing different parts of yourself very organically. So that is another thing I would say that you can integrate. And one more thing, pauses. Pause. And it seems really simple. Stop being on a hamster and a wheel. Yeah, no matter whoever is demanding it for you, keep your boundaries. Have pauses. If that is just taking a few deep breaths, if that is every time you go to a kettle, just allowing yourself just to acknowledge your head to your toe, opening up your awareness, or just open up your visual fields, that you can imagine things, you can see the things standing here. Just open your awareness up, because otherwise we live life like this, and our life becomes this because we're not seeing all the other possibilities that are all around us. We're just not tapping into them.
Well, guys, you two are fantastic. I really do mean this. Thank you so very, very much. You've really opened my eyes. And Kelly, if you were living here in Ras Al Khaimah, I'd be knocking on your door as well. But Mary, it's you and I for a cup of coffee and another chat about this.
I'm envious.
Absolutely. I feel like we should have you as well on an iPad, like on Zoom or something.
I know. I feel like, how can I book my flight?
We can. And you know, Kelly, there's a spare room waiting for you when you come over. Any time. So on that note, guys, I want to say again, thank you very, very much for sharing your expertise, your knowledge, your energy, your enthusiasm for this wonderful topic. And I'm sure other people have found it just as interesting. After this is aired, I will be tagging Mary-Rita and Kelly in, and they can pop in some of the links that they've been talking about today. So if you do want to reach out to them, this is where you're going to be able to find them. You'll be able to find them on my LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook and YouTube channel. So just drop any comments in the comment section, and as I said, they will get back to you. So once again, thank you very, very much. And I would like to bid everybody a really happy and safe evening. Good night.